think what this slide reminds me of is that on this trip, I said yes to things. I said yes to things that were outside my comfort zone, things I would probably usually say no to in my day-to-day life. That was amazing, and I grew a lot. Hi, everyone. Good morning. I will try to project, but if you're in the back and you can't hear me, just, make a hand motion that's helpful. So yes, my name is Samantha Pillion. I'm here today to talk to you about sabbaticals, about the why and how, some logistical tips and tricks for how to make it happen for yourself. So yes, I took a 3-month sabbatical just this past fall, September to December, and I had so much fun that I thought I would do it again, bigger and bolder. So what you'll hear a little bit about today is that I'm actually going to start a gap year in about 5 weeks. So yes. All right. So I think it's good to sort of rewind time a little bit, go back to me back in fall of 2022. I was living, the traditional classic American success story life, right? The 6-figure job, I'm a homeowner in a high cost of living area. I was in a committed relationship of 3 years, and I'd hit CampFI. So I was just generally winning at being an adult, and I was very happy with myself. And then the unthinkable happened. A breakup. The guy I thought I was going to marry and have babies with, we broke up. So I was pretty devastated. I was 33. So women in the room kind of understand where I was at. And I immediately thought, what I need is to recenter in myself and who I am. And I thought, what I need is to go to Costa Rica for 2 weeks in 2 weeks. I probably didn't have enough PTO, right? Who just has 2 weeks of PTO ready to go? But I talked to my employer and I made it happen. I just manifested this trip into existence with 2 weeks notice. And it was awesome. And it was on that trip, I sort of remembered that I love to travel. I took my first solo trip when I was 16. I went abroad for the first time to Spain for a month. And since then, I've enjoyed, 1 or 2 week trips here and there, but never the type of trip where I had the sense of freedom and adventure that I had for that whole month in Spain. And I was always trying to convince friends or partners to travel with me, but no one was ready. No one had the time. No one was sort of willing to do that for more than a week or 2. And I realized on that trip that I was waiting. I kept waiting for someone else to be ready to live the life that I wanted to lead. And so it was time to stop letting that desire for someone to travel with stop me from seeing the world. And, on the trip in Costa Rica, I discovered that for me, solo travel is a type of healing modality. I had a choice. I could keep living life as I knew it. This is my actual house. Or I could embark on the unknown. I could go travel and have adventures. But I can't just travel the world and have fun, right? That's not allowed. So in thinking about taking an extended trip, I kept coming up against, what you'll see are a few familiar roadblocks, right? We are supposed to, pursue the American dream, work hard, get married, have 2.5 children somehow. So there's society's expectations. And then layered on top of that, right, as part of this community, there are the FI expectations that you should earn a high salary, right, either through your primary W-2 or your side hustle. You should maintain a high savings rate. You should save 50% of your salary. You should invest. You should push to your FI number and then live your life. And I've been very happy to see, as we all have in the last couple of years, a little deviation from that, a little more encouragement to sort of pause along the way. And then I also had the reluctance to solo travel. I really wanted to travel with someone else, a friend, a partner. I wanted to take pictures and make memories together. So these are my roadblocks. And I really do want to say here, and I'll try to remember to say later, for me, the biggest hurdle to taking the sabbatical and now the gap year is the mindset, right? It's the belief that I deserve this break, that it's okay, that, I'm allowed to do this. So I knew I was going to need some support to help me overcome these roadblocks. And I'll say, as you mentioned, I've been pursuing FI alone at home, just me and my spreadsheets for 6 years. And I decided it was time to start meeting some of my fellow Phi nerds in person. And that brings us to CampFI Mid-Atlantic last year. 1 year ago today, this was, as I mentioned last night in introductions, this was a life-changing weekend for me, and I hope it will be for many of you. But other than the occasional CampFI or ChooseFI happy hours in DC, this was my first real in-person event. And if you talked to me last year, you know that I had recently sort of realized I reached Coast Phi, as you do, and was considering taking a sabbatical to celebrate. And I was really nervous and awkward about it. So whenever someone met me, I would say like, "Oh, Annie, I'm thinking I might take a sabbatical. I think I might do a month." And I would kind of just, and without exception, every single person was like, "That's a great idea. Why just a month? Do 3 months, do a year." Um, and that was very different from the reaction I get, in sort of normal society with my family or my normal friends who don't do this. They're usually like, "Is now the right time? What will your work say?" All of that. So, everyone was very supportive. And in the weeks following CampFI, I learned about this random retreat happening in Bali from David. I haven't seen him yet this morning, but David was like, "Yeah, you should just come to Bali." And when I heard about the chance to spend more time in person with this lovely community, I knew that I had to go. So I did it. I did a 3-month trip. I started with the Bali Phi Freedom Retreat, and then just figured while I was there, flights are so expensive, the time difference. I'll just stay for 3 months. This makes perfect sense. But it took a lot to get there, right? After you overcome the mindset challenges, there's a lot of logistical challenges. So in preparing for a 3-month sabbatical, there's basically 3 buckets of 3 areas of work that you need to, or things you need to do. And they unfortunately all happen at the same time. They kind of have to weave together and you need to be able to manage all 3 at once. So the 3 areas are: 1, you have to settle up your life at home, right? You are, a functioning adult. You've got bills coming in, subscriptions, license, car registration, all of that. You need to settle up your life at home for the duration of time you're going to be away. So I think what will be most interesting to people in this room is talking about how I handle work. So I do work at a Fortune 50 company here in the US in health insurance. When I was looking to take my leave, I, like the good nerd I am, I pulled up all the HR policies and read through every single page and looked, where's the sabbatical option? There's not a sabbatical option. There's FMLA, there's military leave, there's all these really formal things. If you have a baby, you get time off, as you should. If you, are in the military, you get time off. So what I found was one little row that said unpaid leave of absence for difficult circumstances. And I thought, okay, that's the one I'll use. That's the only one I could possibly use. And I went to my boss. He was relatively new. He'd come in and I said to him, "Hey, Jack, I have this opportunity, this once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to spend time with my community in person. And it's actually on the other side of the world. So I'd like to go, and I'd like to go. I think this is the time in my life where I'd like to take a sabbatical. I'd like to do some travel." And he said, "Oh, okay. What are the HR policies for that?" And thankfully, I'd already done my research. I was able to tell him, this is here. We could use this. And what I noticed about that row in the spreadsheet was all you need is the approval of your direct boss and then their boss. So you need 2 levels of your boss's approvals to make this happen. So I thought, great, challenge accepted. I can do this. So, he said to me, "We really don't do this. I don't think this is going to work, but I'll go talk to the big boss." I said, "Great, go for it." He came back and said, we thought about this. We can't do this. It wouldn't be fair. What if someone else on the team asked for the same exception? And I was like, "Do you really think everyone on the team is prepared to work for 3 months unpaid? Do you really think there will be a flood of people coming to you to ask you for the same leave?" And he was like, "Well, that's a good point." I was like, "Well, yeah, it is a good point." So I said, "Okay, well, I appreciate you guys thinking about it, but I'm going to be taking this leave. My last day will be September 21st. He's like, "Oh, so are you prepared to quit if I don't say yes to this?" And I was like, I love Jack. I love this team. I love the work we do. I love our mission. I would really like to be able to come back, but I've determined that at this place in my life, I've been working since I was 14. I grew up in like a tourist town. I've always worked, always, and I'm ready for a break, and I want this break. So he said, okay, in that case, I'll go back and I'll ask again. So I was like, great. Again, like this is stressful. It's stressful, but it felt right. And I want to note, I had started this conversation 6 weeks before my one-way flight to Bali. So I had that 6 weeks to negotiate. He came back and said, we gave it a lot of thought. What we'd like to offer you is a full month off. And then month 2, you can work 50%. And month 3, you can work 75%. So how does that sound like this? Or we could do it a different way. He had a whole bunch of options like that were variations on that theme. And I said, Jack, it means so much to me that you're taking this seriously, that you're willing to go to Vardini and ask on my behalf. And I really appreciate the support. And what I've decided is I can only do 3 months completely off. That's what I need to do. So he said, like, there's no way Vardini is going to accept. And I'm just, sweating. I'm like, okay, well, let me, he's like, I'll go back to her one more time. I was like, okay. So the next day, I'm driving home from a doctor's appointment, and I use my work phone for a GPS because I'm too cheap to have a full plan with my personal phone. So a ping pops up, Vardini approved your 90-day leave of absence. Done. So, yeah. So you may look at your employer's policies and not see a sabbatical there. And I didn't. So I want you to try, if it's something of interest of you, you can make it happen. So the much easier hurdles were, I own a home, as I mentioned. I decided to rent it out. I rented it out furnished. It was actually way easier than I ever imagined. I used Furnish Finder. I found someone amazing. One thing I'll note with that is people don't really look for housing until the month before they need it. So you may desire to get someone, locked in a month or two out. Like I would love to have someone booked right now for my trip, but that's sort of how it goes. I had a car, and I didn't know what to do with it. I ended up finding an old colleague, a work colleague, who had passed a criminal background check from the government. So I said, you can borrow my car. That works out great. I don't need to pay to put it in storage. And then there's all the life admin I talked about. So if your car registration is coming up, emissions, your license, anything that you kind of need to do as a real adult, settle up your life at home. At the same time, you have to get travel ready, right? You need to save money, which we're all really good at. You need to get the gear that you need for this trip, including making your own ability to pack light. And I've got my show and tell here. This is what I mean by pack light. So this is a 40-liter bag as my main luggage and an international carry-on size. And this is a 20-liter day bag. So I can tell you that I didn't start with these bags, but I ended with these bags. I don't recommend having a third bag. It's a lot to carry. So literally I've done countless hours. I've purchased 5 of almost identical bags, and I compare them all. I can tell you all of my research. You want to go with Osprey, 55 liters or less. Take it or leave it. Cell phones. If you have a U.S. cell phone and it does not ping a U.S. cell tower for 3 months, there's the odd chance you could lose your cell phone number. Your phone company will think you're not here anymore, and they could give your phone number away. Banking, so you'll want a no-fee international debit card. I did all my research. The best one is a Charles Schwab. I think people have probably heard that. That was an amazing card. I never had any problems at all. Multi-factor authentication, we're all familiar with this. And I think when it happens to you in your day-to-day life, you don't even notice anymore. You're like, oh, here's the code, here's the email. So when you go abroad, you're going to need the option to do that via email or an authenticator app, or have a list of the codes printed out. Just make a list of any important apps or websites that you log into and come up with a plan on how you'll figure out your multi-factor authentication. What goes along with that is having a VPN. You'll want to have a VPN that you pay money for. It's just, not that expensive, and it's a good rule of thumb. You can set it up on your phone and your computer. I did have an occasion where I could not pay one of my credit card bills. I will just mention, I know people like the Capital One Venture X card. I do not recommend it for international travel. I had a very frustrating experience with them. There's no way to log in when I was abroad. So that was a little frustrating. But I was able to get a Skype number. You can get an actual US phone number through Skype, and then you can call your banks. But if you try to do it on WhatsApp, I tried like a bunch of other ways. Skype is your solution. Vaccines are super important for some areas of the world. You definitely want to, there's some yucky things out there. You want to get your vaccines. Those are not covered by insurance. They're not covered by health insurance, so you will need to pay out of pocket for those. And then an international driver's license takes 20 minutes. You go to AAA, and then you'll be able to rent a car or a motorbike. We'll talk about that. Anywhere in the world. And it only lasts a year. So if you just took a sabbatical and you're about to go for it, you got to get another one. Plan your trip. Right. So this could be the most exciting part for many of us. Look at your country research. Think about not just the rainy season, but sometimes there's like hottest. Maybe you don't want to go during the hottest season. Maybe there's a holiday you do want to go for, like Cinco de Mayo or Dia de los Muertos. But in some areas, when they have a holiday, the whole town shuts down and everyone leaves for a month. So look at the holidays. Travel hacking. I'm surprised there's not a breakout on that this weekend. But think about how you can use your points to especially cover your major flights to and from wherever you're going. Pretty sure everyone knows this. Your passport needs to have 6 months on it after the date you're planning to return to the US. So that's really important, especially if you're going for a longer time. And then visas. There's very few, if you're privileged enough to have a US passport, there's very few countries that you need to arrange a visa for in advance. Vietnam is one of them. So definitely look into whether or not you need a visa. Download offline maps. I think most of us know that. And then another fun thing you can do with your extra spare time is register your trip with the US State Department, especially if you're going somewhere that's not like Canada or Europe. It's good for them to sort of know where y'all are in case they need to come get you. Okay, the trip was planned. I was ready to go. I had my bags packed, and I basically knew where I was going for the first 2 weeks, and that worked. That was exciting for me. So now I'm going to talk a little bit about the trip, what I did, and some of the lessons I learned from my trip. So the first month was in Bali and the islands surrounding Bali. The group of us went to a water purification ceremony and explored some exciting rice paddies. It was a really good group. I totally recommend the 5 Freedom Retreat. Amy did an amazing job. So for those of you who are interested. So a couple of us stayed around for the weeks after. Keith is here, David. Yeah, Keith and David. And we did a sunrise hike where you got picked up at 3 a.m. and went to go hiking, which if that sounds awful, it was really fun to see the sunrise come up. And I think what this slide reminds me of is that on this trip, I said yes to things. I said yes to things that were outside my comfort zone, things I would probably usually say no to in my day-to-day life. And that was amazing. And I grew a lot. We also went snorkeling with manta rays. That was really fun. And then, this is still Bali. So I went parasailing, and then I went up to Munduk, one of the northern regions. And then on my last day in Bali, I decided to take a scooter lesson, a 4-hour scooter lesson. So after a month with this amazing FI community, I was ready for some solo travel, and I headed off to Thailand, where I spent in total around 6 weeks. So I went all over northern Thailand. These pictures here are from an elephant sanctuary and from the first time I went scuba diving. So let me just say, if you decide to go scuba diving, spend maybe 20 minutes reading about it and what it entails. I did not do that. So it was a little terrifying, but so much fun. Once I figured out how to breathe underwater, everything was good. I also wanted to challenge myself physically. I did a week-long Muay Thai camp in northern Thailand every morning, 8 a.m. for 2 hours. That's my main trainer, Le Chang, and I had the most fun. I literally would like to go back there for a whole month and just do a month in Pai doing that. And then I also went to a mass lantern release festival in Chiang Mai. There was 2 festivals happening at the same time, and that was very, very, very cool. Like a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, right? But I'd like to go more than once, so... I don't like to use that term. A lot of people, when I told them about this trip, they said, wow, that sounds like a once-in-a-lifetime trip. And I know that they were like being supportive, right? And trying to talk me up. But I just get so bummed when people say that. Because for me, I don't want this won't be a once-in-a-lifetime trip. I was very lucky. I did tell my friends, I'm going to Southeast Asia. If anyone wants to join me at any point, anywhere, just let me know and I'll do that. My best friend is in like the maroon orangish sweater. She came all the way from DC to Vietnam and hung out with me for 2 weeks, and we had an epic time. So I love scooters, love motorbikes. So we did the Ha Giang Loop, which is in the very northern part of Vietnam. At one point, we actually could see the border. We could see China. That's China. And it was really cool. So I wasn't a good driver at that point. So you basically are a passenger, and local people who do this like literally every day drive you around, and you get to see these epic, stunning scenery. And I made some amazing lifelong friends. So could not recommend enough. It was the highlight of my entire 3 months, the Ha Giang Loop in Vietnam. We also went to the roof of Indochina, the highest elevation point in Vietnam. And you can see there we're above the clouds. It was very, very high up. And we did your classic Ha Long Bay cruise as a relaxing way to end our 2 weeks of running around Vietnam. So I know I'm showing all these like fun pictures and saying it was really fun, but I do want to come back to the idea of like travel as both a healing modality and a way to get to know yourself a little bit better. So the first week or two, a group of us, including Keith, decided to go to the yoga barn, which is the coolest place on the planet, and try aerial yoga, where you kind of get in this hip belt and then you tip yourself back upside down and you do a series of yoga poses upside down with this belt. I was all excited, So at the beginning, the teacher comes around, there's like 20 people in the class. She gets everyone's names and says, have you done this before? Do you know what you're doing? And, I said no, but I'm excited. It's going to be great. And in the moment when I'm upside down, so you start by holding on to the hip belt, and then you're upside down, you put your legs out, you catch yourself, and then you need to let go. You need to let go and put your hands down on the ground above your head. And you're swinging back and forth a little bit. So you're like swinging back and forth, you're kind of scared. And I just couldn't let go. I didn't want to. I was scared. So before I knew it, the teacher who I'd hardly met is right in front of me. She stops my swing and she says, Samantha, you need to let go. And I thought, how did you know? That is one of my life lessons that I need to learn. That's one of the things that I need to practice and get better at. And so I developed a theory on this trip, which is that the lessons you need to learn will come at you harder and faster when you're outside your comfort zone. You will just encounter them every week until you decide to pay attention. So for me, letting go, trusting the process came up repeatedly. I remember, Amy, bless her soul, would say, we're going down to this water fountain, this feature, you can go swimming, leave your stuff in the car or bring your stuff, And sometimes I would just be like, I won't need it. I won't bring my stuff. And then sure enough, 100 steps later, I would say, wow, I really should have listened to Amy. I really should have trusted the process. You should trust those around you and the process. So if you are looking for your why, right, of why maybe you should consider taking some time away, I would encourage you to think about, what you can learn about yourself on a trip like this. So I know you're all thinking, okay, yeah, but what did it cost? Show us the numbers. And I want to say it costs less than you think. So I'll quickly run through some of these. I love gear. I like merino wool clothing, buying, new Kindle, all that, the vaccines. So all of the gear and vaccines before the trip came to around $3,000. That's me. I make a high salary. I felt like it. You could probably do it for way less. The total cost of everything I spent, so gear and vaccines, the things I paid for in advance, which includes the Bali 5 Freedom Retreat, as well as a little bit of lodging in advance, and the flight, the seat upgrade only. And then the money I spent abroad. So while you're in some of these regions, you will primarily use cash. So in 3 months in this region, I spent around $5,000 in cash. When I showed a friend this presentation, I was getting ready, they said, you've got to put the ultimate reward points on there because otherwise you're not being, genuine about how much you spent. So my round trip flight my one way to Bali and then my return back from Bangkok was around 121,000 ultimate rewards points. So yeah, this cost includes all like local international flights, transportation, lodging, food, activities, everything. But what I really want to pay attention to is what I think of as my travel cost. So if you remove the cost for gear and vaccines, this is really what it costs to be in that region of the world, to get there and to be there. So it's around $7,000 or $2,350 a month. So that is, for a low cost of living region like Southeast Asia. I've heard South America is a little bit more expensive, but generally these are the types of numbers you can look at. I'm going to disappoint you all a little bit here. I did not track my spending by category because I was on vacation having fun. So, it was kind of impossible to track your expenses when you're using cash and everything's in like foreign currencies, and there's 3 different currencies, right? So you're like, whatever, like, sure, here's some baht, But when I got back, I looked at my spending and sort of saw that using that $2,350 amount per month, I spent around $78 a day. In US dollars. And so what I want to say is there's only one area that I really budgeted for, like actively thought about cost savings, and that was lodging, hotels. My rule was I'm 34, I want my own room. I don't want to sleep in a hostel with like 8 other people. So I always had my own private hotel room. The range was $24 to $60 a night with an average of $39 a night. And then everything else was around $40 per day. So you can sort of look at this and see, that's probably a decent reflection of how it might cost, what it might cost to be there. So I wanted to see, I'm taking a gap year, how much do I need to save to do this again? So if you wanted to do about a 6-month trip in a region of the world like this, it would cost you about $14,000. If you want to do a year, it would cost around $28,000. So I like, in looking at this, I would ask you all to consider, what is your monthly cost of living in the United States? Because for me, $2,300 is what I spend on housing alone. So I'm sort of hoping to encourage you all to consider, could long-term slow travel be affordable for you? Could it be an option for you with your savings, with your budget? For me, my sabbatical was so great. I'm doing it again. And I teased this earlier, but I really want to emphasize that the hardest part is still the mindset. It's still the belief that it's okay for me to do this, that I deserve this time away. So I have a request of you all, which is that if you see me this weekend, feel free to remind me that I deserve everything I've earned and I'm worthy and I've earned this trip. And with that, in closing, I really want to urge you all, I know there's many new faces here, to lean into the support of this community as you explore your own non-traditional activities on your own path to FI. I know that running around with a backpack in Southeast Asia might not be for everyone, it's for me. But you can do this too. I'm really not that special. In fact, I'm not the only person from last year's CampFI Mid-Atlantic to take a sabbatical. There's 2 other folks. Chris Starling, who's in the audience today, went to New Zealand for 6 months. And Josh Broad did a motorcycle trip across the United States. And I'm sure there's more people, but those are part of my accountability buddy group. So yeah, I guess in closing, it's the friendships that you make this weekend that are going to support you to do the things that you don't currently think are possible. So thank you very much.